Come swatch with me in my latest Daniel Smith Watercolor Swatch Book series. Today's focus is on yellow ochre, and I'm excited to announce there is a digital stamp set with 13 individual images now available, including this image that you can use to swatch along with me. There's more information in the description below, and be sure to thumbs up and subscribe. This is the image that I drew in part 1 of this video series where I showed you how to use the Zentangle method to draw this journal page. Now I opted to do it on a single sheet of watercolor paper. This is a half sheet, 6 by 9 inches of a 9 by 12 watercolor paper instead of in a journal book this time. I have my palette over to the side and I have 30 spaces to mix my colors. And as I said, today we're going to focus on Daniel Smith Yellow Ochre. All of the paints that I have in my palette are Daniel Smith watercolors. And the original goal of these swatch book pages that I was doing was to learn more about my watercolor paints. There were a lot of times where I would mix colors and end up with gray instead of a purple or a green. And so I really felt like I needed to learn more about what was happening with my paints so that I didn't mess something up on a painting that I was doing. And my second goal was to get more familiar with my Zentangle. I'd become out of practice with Zentangle. I am a certified Zentangle teacher, and I was just out of practice, so I wanted to be able to practice my Zentangle drawings and swatch something that was a little more interesting than just small squares. I felt like I was never going to finish any of those swatching on small squares because it was just too boring. So here I'm laying down yellow ochre. I want to have mass tone or the full strength of yellow ochre over to the right. And then to the left, I'm just blending that out into the clean, clear water that's on the page so that we see the different values that we can get with yellow ochre. Normally I would go from right to left, but I thought it would be nicer to blend that into the title of the page. So let's talk about yellow ochre a little bit. So according to Daniel Smith's website, yellow ochre works especially well with other transparent pigments. Try mixing transparent medium tinting yellow ochre with equally transparent medium tinting viridian. We'll do that actually in this swatch. Somewhat neutral, yellow ochre reacts beautifully with cerulean blue when splattered into damp paint. While traditionally yellow ochres tend to be opaque or whitened with other brands, our Daniel Smith Yellow Ochre is transparent, a property beloved by watercolorists. So you'll see here that I will actually lay down clean clear water, just a really thin layer of clean clear water to each one of these swatch shells. I do this throughout the video, but I trim that part out because you don't need to see it, and it helped to shorten the video a little bit, but I did want to point that out. The first color that I'm going to swatch here is going to be Buff Titanium, and right out of the gate I mess this swatch up and have to blot it up and restart, so I'll show you how I do that. But I mentioned in my last video I took February off from all artistic things, just everything. I dropped off of social media. I asked for a break from my design teams. I had some health issues that I needed to get in order, and I'm a little out of sorts. This is kind of like my first thing back into crafting when I recorded this, and so what I intended to do with this swatch was put down plain Buff Titanium in one corner and the mixture of yellow ochre and Buff Titanium in the other. I thought that that would give me a better idea when I'm looking at this finished swatch page of the colors and the comparison of the mixture to the color that yellow ochre is mixed with. So you can see me blot it up with a clean microfiber cloth there. Now you can see that the yellow ochre does stain a little bit. I probably could work at that with a wet paintbrush and get some of that paint up, because according to Daniel Smith's website, yellow ochre is a non-staining paint. You can see that it's stained there just a tiny bit. So Buff Titanium is more of an opaque or semi-opaque paint here. It's basically an unbleached white. It's not something that I paint with really just by itself. I do like to splatter it into wet paint because I think you get some really cool effects that way. If you were to mix this with any other color, it's going to take a transparent color and turn it semi-opaque because it's an opaque color. So just keep that in mind if you are looking to mix this with another color. It'll act a lot like white will. If you have like a dark blue down on your page, like an indigo that's pretty wet, and you drop this into it though, you get really pretty swirls, almost like coffee cream. So you can get some neat techniques with it. Next up, I have Hansa Yellow Light. Now, this is basically like a neon yellow, and it's not a color I would necessarily use on its own. I think the only thing I can think of that I might paint with that would be like a galaxy or a nebula. It's just so super bright. But this is an excellent mixing color. It is, a lot of times it'll be the cool yellow that you see in watercolor palettes. What Daniel Smith has to say, it's a cleaner, more transparent, and brighter in chroma than cadmium yellow light. This is a high tinting organic pigment. Hansa Yellow is considered the perfect yellow, offering more control when mixing. Painters admire the purity of this primary pigment and ability to adjust its temperature while avoiding a gray from a hidden complement. This next color I'm using is Naples Yellow. It's also a little opaque. It's got a little bit of white in it, and it's just a beautiful color all on its own. Let's go back to that hidden complement. So you'll hear people talk about single pigment paints. Hansa Yellow Light is a single pigment paint, and when I was trying to choose the colors that I was going to have in my palette, I chose a lot of single pigment paints and also some convenience colors, which are colors that are already pre-mixed for you, like greens are going to be pre-mixed for you, a lot of them. So your Hansa Yellow Light, they spoke about avoiding a gray from a hidden complement. Some paints might have a hidden complement in it. If it's a convenience color that's been mixed, it might be a blue that also has some yellow in it or leans towards yellow. And sometimes you'll start to get, like they said, a gray or a really dusky purple. You're trying to mix purple, but you end up with gray. And that comes from that hidden complement in there. If you don't have it, if you're not mixing your purples with a true blue or a single pigment blue, or maybe you're mixing a cool blue with a warm yellow, you might end up with more of a gray than that green that you are looking for. And we'll see some examples of this as we continue swatching. This is Pyrrole Orange, which is a beautiful color. It looks like orange crushed soda to me. I just love that color so much. The color I did before that was New Gamboge, which oftentimes is the warm yellow that you'll find in watercolor palettes. This one is quinacridone Coral. Quinacridone Coral is also so pretty all on its own, and also mixed with other colors. It really mixes beautifully with other colors too, I would say. So like, look at those two colors together there. Gorgeous. I love it. This next color is Pyrrole Scarlet. This is my warm red in my palette. Now, if you're getting confused with your warm and cools, I still do. What I have to do is just compare that color to the other colors in my palette and look at its temperature in relation to those other colors. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, is a blue or a purple warm or cool just on its own. This is quinacridone Rose, and if you watched my last video, you know I'm a huge fan of quinacridone Rose. It might be one of my favorite colors. Truly, it's just beautiful, and it plays well with other colors. Your quinacridones are known to be vivid in clarity and intensity, according to the Daniel Smith website, and I totally agree with that. For quinacridone Rose, it says it's a red-violet color and lends itself to fabulous purples. Try with indigo for deep, dusty purples or Indian throne blue for rich, clear purples. Quinacridone Rose can be mixed with quinacridone Sienna and burnt orange in dilute wash states to create flesh tones or convincing sunsets. It's highly durable and extremely transparent, as are all the quinacridones in the Daniel Smith series. Look at those colors, you guys. So this is definitely reminding me of some summer scenes. I can totally see some watermelons, citrus fruit, like different types of fruity drinks in mason jars, watercolored with this particular palette going on in the middle here. I think those colors are just gorgeous. I really love them. And I wouldn't have thought, I kind of think of yellow ochre as more of a brown earth tone. Like you can see where it is on my palette. I don't have it up with the yellows. I have it down more with the earth tones. And so I'm surprised to see that it mixes these really bright, beautiful, clear colors. And maybe that means that it is a little more transparent, like Daniel Smith says. I've always considered yellow ochre, even the Daniel Smith one, to be a little more semi-transparent. It looks a little milky to me, but you get some really clear colors with it. Next up is quinacridone violet, which is another gorgeous color. Daniel Smith considers quinacridone violet to disperse evenly with slight granulation and moves from deep darks to clear glowing washes, which is interesting because most quinacridones are non-granulating. And if you look at their specs on this paint, it actually is listed as a non-granulating paint. So it's interesting that they have that in the write-up. Like all quinacridones, it's an extremely light, fast, organic pigment, to their website says. In terms of complementary colors or couples, quinacridone violet mixes best with a cleaner primary green. All right. This next one is quinacridone purple. So the quinacridone violet is the warm purple, and quinacridone purple is going to be the cool purple, if you will. And look at that gorgeous color. I could see that in so many different applications. It's kind of like a purpley burgundy. It would be great at Christmas time, the one that's mixed with the yellow ochre. But look at those two colors together, especially with that white in the middle. That would make a beautiful gradient background on a card, or to even have different types of florals with some of that super bright purple, the quin purple, and then that mixture with the yellow ochre. I think that would be beautiful. Next up is indigo, which is fabulous for any kind of moody type of scene, or in, I don't know, like a moody background and those types of things. Obviously, it's great for denim if you're doing clothes or anything like that. It's a perfect color for that. But it's also great for shadows, to drop it into your pink flowers and stuff like that, right in the center of the flower, to get some depth in there. It's just a gorgeous color. I really enjoy indigo. And when you mix yellow ochre with indigo, you get a little bit of a gray. Not so much a green, you get more of a gray. It has a slight greenish tinge to it, but it's mostly just a neutral gray. Unlike when you mix yellow ochre with Mayan dark blue, which is this color that I'm doing now, you get more of a dusty green. So according to Daniel Smith, Mayan dark blue is darker and warmer than Mayan blue genuine. I also have that color, and I'll be swatching that in just a minute. But you'll see this turns a little bit more green. Now this makes me think of, I have a warm blue and a warm yellow. I'm mixing them together and I'm getting more of this green color. Whereas maybe the indigo is a cool blue mixed with a warm yellow, and that's why we got more of a neutralized gray. That's kind of how I have to think about it in my head. I don't know if that always works out to be true, but that's how I have to rationalize it and try and think about it. What I can say is what's really helping is doing these swatch pages, and over you'll see one particular color that will mix in a certain way, and you'll get to know your paints more and whether or not they're warm or cool, and how they respond to other colors. This is Indian Throne Blue, which is a really inky blue, super pretty. This can also be a moody one, but it's a little bit brighter. So you can, this is beautiful for backgrounds. You can add this into skies, seas, all that good stuff. And you can see this is kind of like a greenish gray as well. That's a little bit of a cooler blue. Next up we have French Ultramarine, which is definitely the cool blue. It is most often the cool blue that you will find, whether it's French Ultramarine or Ultramarine blue. That's the cool blue that you'll find in most watercolor palettes. It's super pure in terms of its pigment and color. It's a single pigment color, and look at it. It's just gorgeous. Like, I want to put that on everything just the way that it is. When you mix it with yellow ochre, you're going to get more of that grayish color again. So again, my cool blues mixing with yellow ochre are tending to come up with that gray mixture. So I'm kind of storing that in the back of my mind so that I kind of remember that and understand that as I'm mixing colors together for projects. Next up is phthalo blue green shade. This color is amazing, but you only need the tiniest bit of it. It's also super high staining, so this isn't one like if you put it in the wrong place or you put too much that you're going to be able to blot up very easily. So this is one you want to be a little more careful with. But check out that mixture. Is that gorgeous or what? Like those two colors together on a project, like maybe an underwater scene, mermaids, fish scales, those kind of things, like those two colors are absolutely amazing. Love it. If you mix phthalo blue green shade with Hansa yellow light, you're going to get a beautifully bright and clear and vivid green. It'll just be so pretty. Okay, the next color is Mayan Blue Genuine. So Mayan Blue Genuine is kind of the complement to my Mayan Dark Blue. And I haven't decided, I don't feel like I need both of these colors. And I haven't decided which one I want to take out of my palette. The advantage in my eyes to Mayan Blue Genuine is that it's a granulating color. It's part of the Genuine or Primatech line, which are ground up gemstones. And so they granulate. A quinacridone is not typically going to granulate, or a phthalo isn't typically going to granulate. It's going to go on the paper smooth. And whereas your granulating pigments are going to go onto the paper, I wouldn't say patchy, but they're going to settle and kind of separate into the nooks and crannies. Oftentimes when you mix a granulating color with another one, sometimes you'll see the separation of those two colors, or you'll see the separation of that individual color because the stones that are ground up have multiple colors in them. And you'll kind of see those different colors separate on the paper. To me, that's gorgeous and beautiful, but not everybody likes granulating. So if you don't like granulating, maybe check out the quinacridones and the phthalos. What are we doing now? Now we're on to Amazonite Genuine. That's another Primatech color, and that's another one that'll granulate. A lot of times I feel like, do I really need this color? I try to stay away from a lot of the genuines because they are the most expensive paints in the Daniel Smith line because, again, they're ground up gemstones. And I think you can totally substitute Viridian, which is the color that I'm doing now, for Amazonite, and that would be totally fine. I don't think you'd have to worry about that at all. So if you're on a budget and you want a less expensive tube of paint, maybe try the Viridian over the Amazonite Genuine. When I read the blurb about yellow ochre from the Daniel Smith site, it's recommended mixing it with Viridian, which is what I'm doing right now. And indeed, that is a beautiful color. I would definitely want to use that on a project. This is sap green, which is a convenience color. So sap green is not a single pigment color. It's a mix of different pigments. So you can get into trouble when you mix a convenience color with other colors, depending on what you're mixing it with, because it has several different pigments in it. So you can really easily end up with mud or a dirty brown or a dirty gray. Sap green mixed with yellow ochre, though, is quite beautiful. That is I'm totally loving that color. I really tend to love like the mustard colors, which is so weird because I've always been more of like a jewel tone, bright colored kind of gal, but I probably green and blue is my favorite color, particularly green. So moving from left to right on this journal page, what I'm seeing, we started off with some citrusy kind of colors, really reminded me of summer. Then in the middle, we got towards like underwater colors, mermaids, that types of things. And now we're getting into more of the earth tones where I'm feeling like landscapes and that kind of thing. So with these different shades of greens, what I have in my mind are cacti, succulents, obviously different types of plant life, but these greens mixed with those vibrant pinks and purples over there, I can totally see blooming cactus, or maybe even Christmas cactus or things like that. As we move further to the right and get more towards the earth tones, it's going to be perfect colors, you guys, for like a Sedona scene. with the red rocks, maybe a Santa Fe scene. I can see creating an entire landscape with the colors on this page, and you'll see that as we get to these more earth tones. Pyroline green is one of my favorites. Pyroline green and raw umber violet, which we'll swatch in just a bit, are two colors that can very easily neutralize your other colors quickly. So I'll link a video in the top right hand corner where I used Pyroline green to neutralize my color palette for a muted set of colors. It's gorgeous all on its own, but it does mix really well and beautifully with other colors. If you guys are enjoying this video, please take the time to hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. The next installment in this series is going to be where I use these colored mixtures to paint a card, so you don't want to miss that. The next color is transparent red oxide, which is really pretty. It's a transparent burnt orange, according to Daniel Smith. It mixes well with lamp black to create tones of cinnamon and tobacco. Fire seems to dance on the walls as its peach undertones nestle in with the black. Incredibly warm and non-staining, you can create stunning effects. Glaze it over the French ochre for a warm fireside glow, or layer it over itself for a rich and glowing red ochre that has no equal. Next up, I'm mixing raw umber violet. This is a convenience color. It has two pigments in it. It has raw umber and quinacridone violet in this one. This is another one like the Pyroline green. If you mix this one with a few colors, you can neutralize the colors really quickly and get a beautifully muted palette. I just love the violet side of raw umber with this mixture. To me, it is so pretty. I could see this in fall leaves and just a bunch of different settings. It's great for shadows. To add something that's just a little bit different than just black or blue, it's just a really stunning color in my opinion. And just look at those earth tones over there with the red, or the transparent red oxide and the raw umber, and the mixtures with the yellow ochre. So pretty. Okay, this is neutral tint. This is the last time I'm going to talk about neutral tint because I've moved it into my secondary palette already after this video because I just never use it. You can use neutral tint for shadows. You can use it to neutralize your colors and mix up a gray, but I don't normally do that. What I normally do is use the colors that I'm already using in my project and mix those together to create a gray that is going to better match the project that I'm working on. Neutral tint, I mean, it's neutral, right? But it's not necessarily going to match what you've got going on the page. So I prefer to just mix the gray, which you can see is pretty easy to do. So I'm going to take neutral tint out of my palette. The last one that I did was quinacridone gold. That's what I replaced the neutral tint with. That is a gorgeous color. And this one is burnt umber. So I had burnt umber before I'd had transparent red oxide, and it's okay. It's a nice color. It's a great paint. I just think it's a little boring. It's just kind of just like boring brown. It didn't excite me at all. Transparent red oxide is a lot more exciting in my opinion, and I like the tone of that much more than the burnt umber. The last one is quinacridone pink, which is looking a lot like opera pink, except for quinacridone pink is not fugitive, it's light fast. This sucker is super bright. The only reason it's in my secondary palette is because I didn't feel like I needed quinacridone pink and quinacridone rose. They're pretty close in color, but looking at it, it's just gorgeous. All right, so we finished swatching all of our yellow ochre mixtures, and if you weren't a fan of yellow ochre before, maybe this opened your eyes a little bit to the usefulness of this color and what kind of mixtures you can get from it. Here's a close-up of the finished journal page, and what I'll end up doing is after I have all of my pages finished, what I'll do is I'll bind them into a journal so that they're handy and I can flip through them. Haven't decided how I'm going to do that yet. If I do, I will definitely share a video on that. Here are the cards that are included in that digital stamp set. I watercolored the one on the right and Copic colored the two on the left. I do have that on film, so the watercolor card will be the next one to post in this series. Thanks so much for joining me today, you guys. If you learned something new, do be sure to thumbs up, subscribe, hit that bell button so that you don't miss the next video, and be sure to check out that digital stamp below.